Mr. Fairley, do you have everybody you're expecting to have?
Yes, that should be everyone.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. It's 4 o'clock and we're all here. And I will call to order the May 15th, 2023 Charlottesville City Council meeting. Ms. Robinson, will you call the roll?
Councilor Payne,
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even notice Michael wasn't here. Well, he'll be here momentarily. Let's go. Yeah. Okay, not here yet, but soon. Next.
Councilor Pinkston,
Here.
Councilor Puryear,
Here.
Mayor Snook,
Here.
Vice Mayor Wade.
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum. Is there a motion to approve or to amend the agenda?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I guess we get to cast our vote this time. Please cast your vote. Motion passes. This meeting will be divided into 3 main sections. First is a work session that is devoted to hearing and discussing presentations that do not require a council vote. Typically that runs till about 5:30, followed by a closed meeting, which will be roughly 5:30 to 6:30. Then the city council business meeting, which will be back here in chambers, which will be open to the public, will begin around 6:30 p.m. So on our 4 o'clock agenda, we have a number of reports. The first one is from the Youth Council, and Daniel Fairley, the Youth Opportunity Coordinator, is to present our guests.
Yes, you can come up, yes. Hello, everyone. Mayor Snook, Vice Mayor Wade, members of the council.
Let me stop you just a second. I apologize, Michael. I hadn't noticed. I looked right past the vacant seat. I didn't mean to start without you.
That is quite all right.
So we now have, all 5 of us are here.
Okay,
Good.
everyone's here. Fantastic. So thank you all for having us. I'm a representative and advisor for Youth Council. These are some of our students that are here. Very excited that you all are getting to hear about their adventurous year. They'll be talking to you about a number of activities they both have completed as a Youth Council, including voter registration drives and packing bags for people experiencing homelessness. And then they also will talk about some of the things that they've learned. I'll often get requests from various organizations saying, hey, can we have youth perspective on climate? Can we have youth perspective on homelessness or things like that? And so we've had different organizations that have come in and presented to us. And so I'm excited for them to come with their presentation to talk about what they've learned so far and kind of some things that they have coming up for the future. Awesome.
You want to introduce?
Yes. I'm looking for David. Is he online?
He should
be.
He's back there.
He's back. Oh, just back there. Okay,
Yes, Mr.
fantastic.
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Fairley. Could
so
you also please grab the clicker that's down front near the LED timer?
I see it. This. Okay. Is there? There it is. There's the presentation. Okay, fantastic. All right. So you all are welcome to come up. You all remember your order? You're laugh.
Somebody's got to go
There we
first.
go.
Someone.
It's ours first.
All right.
Yep. Yep. You come here.
Both microphones work.
But there's only a clicker on this side.
Sure.
Hello everyone, I'm Azhar. Nice to meet you all again. I was part of the youth council member. We get to we worked with C3, the Community Climate Collaborative, and they wanted youth representation and youth voices and opinions on how things are going in the city, and they went well. And as part of their Jedi Ambassadors program, and currently their ambassador for PHA that they are partnering with, we worked on trying to see on how we can reach out to the community and posters, and learned about their programs that they had, other programs like their climate justice ambassadors or their internships for high schoolers, so that they could get an opportunity to represent their voices and get a career building from them from the beginning. We worked with them on, and they taught us more on the energy equity and all the problems that they had in Charlottesville, and as they went through it year by year and solving all of them, they taught us about clean transportation and their programs and future plans on trying to keep a clean city and clean transportation, especially city buses and everything, and home energy challenges that people faced with either paying bills or over consuming electricity, which they were working on trying to limit for houses that needed them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Josie Fishman, and the next thing that we did as a part of Youth Council was we heard from a representative from the Albemarle Housing Improvement Program, or AHIP, and we learned about a number of their campaigns. The first one is the campaign for Safe at Home for seniors, and that was about how they are helping senior citizens in Charlottesville with handicap ramps and chairlifts and grab bars and other things to make their homes more safe and accessible for them. And another campaign that they told us about was the Safe at Home for Children, and that was focused on removing the lead-based paint that they had in many of the older houses in some of the neighborhoods in Charlottesville. And then the final thing for the Safe at Home campaign was regarding neighbors, and specifically revitalizing neighborhoods, which were the 10th and Page neighborhood, the Orchard Acres, the Orangedale and Prospect neighborhood, and the Belmont neighborhoods. And they told us, the representative from AHIP told us about all of their campaigns, and we learned a lot about the work that they're doing. And then the next thing is
Clicking the right button. This one?
I wonder if you have to point it at something in particular.
Daniel,
There we go.
There it is.
whatever you did, that was it.
I don't know what I did. I have to go one more, though.
Oh,
That's the issue. Okay.
all right.
There we go. Hi, I'm Nava Kurgel, and I'm going to talk to you guys about what we did with our bag distribution to people experiencing homelessness. So we packed bags with necessities such as clothes, tampons, food like ramen that could be packaged for later, in bags that were water resistant and could be reused for later. And we went on the downtown mall and we gave out these bags to people who we thought might need them by asking and receiving, and they were all very grateful. And while doing that, we also offered the Haven as a resource that they could use, as we also gave our leftover bags to the Haven. And leftover bags, we actually had more bags than we could give out that day, which is of course due to time, but it's hopefully a good thing. And we gave those leftover bags to the Haven and even took some to make sure we could continue our distribution. And from this experience, we got to connect with those in our community who are suffering, which is really important on the ground level, to treat these people like they are people. And to make sure that as youth we start building that connection early is really important, so that we can continue to find solutions that all of us can be involved with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I do it? No, I went too far. There we go.
Hello, I'm Jasmine. I'm also obviously part of Youth Council. So I'm going to be covering the She Shelter and why it was important for us to have someone come and talk about it. So the Shelter for Help in Emergency is a local nonprofit organization, if you didn't know, that provides trauma-informed services to victims of domestic violence. During our visit from Alex Weathersby, we learned that abuse can come in multiple forms and it may not always be recognizable. And that's especially why I think that it's really important for youth to have connections to people like that, because as young adults, it might not always be obvious that you could be in an abusive relationship, and abuse comes in multiple different forms. So yeah, the She Shelter also offers education programs to law enforcement professionals, social service people, mental health professionals as well. They also do presentations for civic organizations and faith communities, and for each month, well, not each month, but sometimes they have activities in observance of Domestic Violence Awareness Month and Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And And they also, I think, as I said before, they do prevention and awareness programs for schools and communities. So that's why I felt that it was important that we were able to experience like a presentation from someone that was a professional in that area.
Thank you.
Oops, went too far. Okay, so my name is Christopher. I'm also part of the Youth Council, and I'm here to talk about when we did voter registration. So we went through from our public city schools, and we got the seniors and those who are going to be eligible to vote in the next election. We gave them resources and raised awareness that they can vote and they must use their voice to vote. So we did. We got 30 people registered to vote at homecoming. And then we got a lot of people to do a voter registration course through pamphlets, and I think we got a lot more people to vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gloria, and I can't speak. I'll be talking about the youth street sheet that we created. From our experiences of meeting people from the said organizations earlier and serving our community, we have decided as a collective to create a youth street sheet that has hotlines, organizations like volunteer opportunities, jobs, and mental health resources that we felt that teens should know to better themselves and their community. We have organizations like Sarah that was listed earlier, Abundant Life, Girl Scouts, and so much more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So this is, we don't really have like a picture of us, everyone together, but this was a time when we were just kind of hanging out and talking to each other, doing some, what's your favorite animal games and favorite movies. We found out that Ezra doesn't watch TV, or he says he doesn't, but then he has some other TV references that we know of. So, so I just want to say thank you to our youth council members and all their hard work over the past year. You'll see if you go through the youth street sheet, it's currently like a Google Sheets Excel document, so we can update it regularly. But it will also then be linked to an upcoming sheet, an upcoming website actually, through the Equity Center that has kind of like youth-focused programming. So it's going to be basically like a little link tree that has resources that you can go and view, such as 988, a mental health resource hotline, that are kind of specific to those like mental health resources. And then you also are going to have an opportunity to view kind of the larger, just what's available, summer camps, things like that, that youth can be a part of during the school year as well. So we have those two things that are coming up. But I just wanted to say thank you all. Do you all have any questions for our young people as we kind of close out? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think the idea of the youth street sheet is really a great idea, and I like that you did the QR code, because I think it would just be easy for the youth to access, and because I use the sheet that Ashley gave me for adults all the time, so I imagine something like that for youth will be really good. Just for any of the youth, if you could just tell us one or two things that maybe you learned that you didn't know before you went through this last year, that you didn't know, and that you feel like you're a better person because of it.
Anyone can start. Go ahead, Ezra.
Why don't you come on down so we can hear you?
Is this the young man who doesn't look at TV?
Yes, that's the one. No. I promise my TV visualization is very limited. So before coming to Youth Council, I didn't know that Charlottesville had this many resources from Sarah and She and C3 and all these other programs to help to the community. I thought it was more of like the social services where everybody would go, report their problems, and they would be it would be taken care of or not. So I was not aware that there was so much more, that they were like from mental health to like their housing and electricity bills, everything was there. I was really surprised that Charlottesville, even though people call it such a small city, has so many resources for youth, and it just continuously works. And you could see and ask those programs like She and C3 and the transportation district and all these other organizations that were mentioned, that they all had future plans that were just expanding on trying to reach out to the community. One thing I did know, however, was that there was a city council and a youth council that we could like have youth representation and that youth could come and speak to them and still be able to be heard by the adults. So that was it. Thank you.
And let me add, you don't have to come only when Mr. Fairley is telling you to come. Every meeting, whoever wants to speak can speak, okay? And either in person or by Zoom.
I have one quick follow-up. I'm just curious, when y'all approach our residents, house residents with the bags, what was that interaction like? Were any of y'all reluctant or scared or anything like that? Or?
Yeah, so most of the residents that we handed out bags to were extremely grateful, and I mean, even overpraised us because what we were doing wasn't that difficult, but it's for them it's such a simple act is going to make such a huge impact in their lives, and so they're all very grateful, and it was a very positive attitude, and that's something I've taken away from Youth Council, is seeing the positive attitudes of our different Charlottesville community members, from those people who received the bags to people who came in to talk to us because they just want to share what they do, and with Mr. Fairley too, taking his time to help us even outside of his hours. So we're very grateful for all the positivity in Charlottesville.
All right, thank you.
I just have a general question, and I don't know who, anybody can answer, no, no formula here. People keep telling us one of the reasons why we're having problems with violence in the community and so on is there's just not enough stuff for kids to do. Anybody have any specific suggestions for us? Something you say, you know what the city really ought to be doing is this.
Well, that got a quick answer, didn't it?
All right.
I feel like the city needs more of a recreational area for kids. I know like we don't have that many like opportunities for like teens. Like, you know, the ice skating rink is now a coding building for UVA, which was a place people hung out at. People can't hang out downtown because that's just a place where you can only buy stuff and kids don't have money like that. And now the mall, with all the businesses being shut down, there's no really such an area for kids to group together and actually have fun. So, yeah.
She's been thinking about that. That's very clear.
It's a question that gets asked a lot in schools because it's a concern that many kids have. They don't feel like this town thinks about them as they do like UVA students or adults.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else got a thought?
I think going along with that train of thought, having recreational activities, especially after school, and making sure that kids can get to those, because right now there's only one 5 o'clock activity bus for CHS kids, which wouldn't be helpful for all sports or clubs, and making sure that kids can put in their energy and look to something positive, and when they're feeling all of this, if they're feeling a negative environment at home, that they can have somewhere to look forward to, because classes are not always as fun as we like them to be. So having something as an extracurricular could be a really great avenue for those types of feelings.
Anything in particular that ought to be an extracurricular that you say, man, we could really get a bunch of people involved in this?
I think helping with the transportation to and from extracurriculars, and potentially subsidizing what those extracurriculars can provide, because like snacks are a really great incentive to get kids who wouldn't otherwise come, and then they could realize, oh, this club is really great. Like there's a quiz bowl team, which so far is the only kids who really attend that are kids who are already privileged and aren't the ones in dire need of an extracurricular. So helping incentivize kids to go to activities like that, I think, would be really helpful.
Okay. Any other thoughts, folks?
Mr. Mayor, if I may. Oh, please go on.
Sorry, you can.
Please.
Okay. Just to add on to the idea of additional recreational spaces, I think that the Charlottesville Skate Park is a place that's nice because it is sort of free and kids are allowed to just go there and hang out, and it's not structured in the way that like a lot of clubs at school are, which sometimes is a little bit scary to kids. And I think that having more spaces like that where kids can hang out and be kids and have fun, but not be worrying about home lives or engaging in violence and things like that. So Gloria was mentioning the ice skating rink. Obviously the ice skating rink no longer exists, but if we could maybe implement another place like that that's free, that kids could hang out and have fun and not be worried about things going on at home or at school or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to ask Mr. Farley if you would work with my office to organize a meeting with the city manager's staff and the youth council so that we can hear even more from them, their ideas about what we can do here in Charlottesville. I would appreciate it.
Absolutely, I can do that.
All right, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Anybody
Thank
else?
you.
Questions or comments?
No,
You guys rock.
just
Thank
looking
you.
forward to the students' suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
You know how I am, Daniel.
I know.
You'll write it up. You'll send me an email.
I will.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Fantastic. I'm happy to hear that. Awesome. Thank you all for letting us present today. We look forward to continuing on in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Okay. So, you can stay for an exciting presentation on our economic development plan. Okay, anyway, Chris Engel will introduce our speaker on the presentation and review of the draft economic development strategic plan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, councilors. It will be a tough act to follow the Youth Council, but we'll do our best. Many of you are aware that the city engaged Resonance Consultancy a number of months ago to help develop and update an economic development strategic plan. And today we have them joining virtually to give a presentation that will capture the work done to date and give you a look at the draft strategies as they're developing, and then we'll seek some feedback from you towards the end, either today or via email or after the fact. So with that, I'd like to introduce the team, and I see them. We have two folks joining us from Resonance. Stephen Pedigo will be leading most of the presentation, I believe. Stephen is a vice president with Resonance. He's also a professor at the University of Texas and well regarded in urban economic development issues. And he's joined by Amnea Fahmy, who's the research expert and all-around organizer of their engagements. And I believe I'll hand it off to Stephen. You guys should have the ability to advance your slides, and we can see you. And as soon as we hear you, we'll be good to go.
Is it possible to get this screen turned on?
Don't know.
Okay, maybe not.
The one in front, David, that's facing council, can we turn that one on?
Yes, I'll come out and do that once they begin.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Stephen.
Can't hear you. We can't hear you.
He must be on mute.
Are you on mute?
Still on mute, Stephen?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Is that a control at our end?
David is adjusting something.
Yeah, I see him doing something.
Yeah,
He says he's not on mute, so it must be something at our end.
Is your consultant sharing their screen?
They are.
Okay, what it appears is he's trying to fix his input, because it's gonna come from his side, I think. So I see him diligently trying to check inputs and outputs.
Yes, can you all please speak a little bit on your end so we can test that?
Yeah, testing, 1,
Sure,
2, 3.
Keith.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, yes,
Can you hear us?
yes,
Okay,
thank you.
terrific. No
Somebody
worries.
at the right
And
button.
You guys can see our slides.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, sounds like we're good to go then. So good afternoon, y'all. Good to see you. Well, can't see you, but good to be with you virtually. We have spent the last, I guess, almost 5 months working with Chris and team on this economic development strategy that we're going to share with you all today. And so as part of today's conversation, what we'll do is, 1 second, let me get my slides to work again for you here. There we go. You guys should see our slides again still.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. What we'll do today is talk a little bit through our project introduction, give you a little sense of how the project has progressed over the last few months throughout the engagement. We'll then spend some time talking through our research overview, and then finally move into talking through the draft strategy that we've developed thus far.
Stephen, your slides are frozen, so we can only see the cover slide.
I don't think that's me.
Yes, now it's moving. That's fine.
Yeah, it's not. I think there's a delay on the city side, actually. It's not allowing me to advance my slides for some reason.
Okay.
I can advance them for you if you don't mind just saying next slide when ready.
Yeah, I would rather do that anyway. So we'll talk through the research introduction, give you a little bit of the overview of the research, and then talk about the strategy. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, this project was really built over the course of 4 phases. Phase 1, which was working through a research plan for the project, an engagement plan for the project. We also worked with Chris and his team to pull together an advisory steering committee for this project. So over the course of this project, in addition to presenting to Chris and team and others, we've also had stakeholders from the business community, other community organizations throughout Charlottesville, as well as some of our economic development partners see the research, inform us on the research, but also have an opportunity to provide comments on the strategy that you're going to see today. So the strategy that you see today will incorporate both the comments that we received from Chris and his team, but in addition to that, representatives from that steering committee as well. So that's kind of phase 1. Phase 2, we spent a significant amount of time doing a discovery for this project, and there was several pieces of that research project, which Anaya will walk us through in a second to give you a sense of how we got to informing the strategy. We then spent a considerable amount of time doing community engagement. 2 pieces to that was a community survey, community and business survey that had a really strong representation in terms of responses. In addition to that, spent a few days doing community roundtable discussions. And I think we met actually, when Camille and I was there, we met with many of you one-on-one and in person as well. And then we're now sort of into phase 4, which is putting together the strategy. So walking through our draft strategy. We've done that with Chris and team and our advisory committee, and now we're presenting to y'all for some of your feedback, and then we'll move to our implementation work once we're done through that work. So let's turn to the next slide. If you go to the next slide, I'll have Amnea talk a little bit about what we've done thus far in the research.
Thank you, Stephen. So a bit more about phases 2 and 3 of the project, really the discovery phase of the process. So during that phase, what we've done was a competitive benchmarking analysis. This was a comprehensive evaluation of Charlottesville and peer communities across 6 pillars, ranging from economic vitality to quality of life, just to give us a holistic view of the performance of Charlottesville across different categories. We've also done an industry cluster and the career pathway analysis, which was an assessment of the industry and the workforce strengths and opportunities in Charlottesville. We've also done a real estate and land use review, which was an analysis of the development potential and the future of the built environment for the city. And this was also tied to the industry cluster work that we've done, so that we can see the development potential as it relates to the different target clusters. In terms of stakeholder engagement, we've done a community and business survey, which was widely distributed and was on the field for around 5 weeks. This was a survey for residents and business owners to gather input on community needs, assets, and economic development priorities. And then, as Stephen mentioned, Stephen and our stakeholder engagement facilitator, Camille, were on the ground in Charlottesville for 3 days, holding roundtable discussions with more than 80 community members and meeting with you all. Stephen, you're muted now.
I know. We provided all summaries of all of that research to Chris and team, and you guys can take a look at, can share those appendices if you'd like. But what we'll do now is just summarize some of the key insights of that research as it's led to us to the foundation for the strategy work. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we've got 10 key takeaways that drive the strategic work. First and foremost is that Charlottesville is a diverse and young community with an authentic small town charm. So about 51,000 residents in town. This has grown about 3%, which is on par with how the Commonwealth and the U.S. have both grown in terms of their population growth. In addition to looking at the population growth, Charlottesville is also a quite diverse town. So about 35% of the residents in Charlottesville are people of color. And a lot of the things that we heard throughout our engagement is that in addition to being a young and diverse town, there's a lot of great small town authentic charm and place-making assets that are really relevant to the identity of who Charlottesville is. Next slide, please. Charlottesville is home to a highly skilled workforce, a variety of industries, and a really strong, healthy economy. So one of the things that jumps out to us is how highly educated the city of residents in Charlottesville are. About 72% of residents, 72% higher share of residents have a bachelor's degree or higher than the U.S. average. About a third of the workforce is employed in knowledge-based industries. Obviously, this is with the strong presence of UVA. And then by all accounts, when you look at all of the metrics by which you would evaluate one's regional and city economy, there's strong performance on those indicators. So a very productive workforce, low unemployment, steady job growth, and a very high labor participation rate as well. Next slide, please. Charlottesville has competitive industry sectors, a strong foundation for our economic development strategy going forward. And Amna's going to spend some time in a bit talking a little bit about those specific capabilities, but really strong export sectors in defense and life sciences and business services and tourism. Those sectors collectively employ about 13,000 employees, and that's what we would consider your sort of export or traded-based sector economy, which really provide the foundation by which we think through how we build around competitive economic development strategies looking to the future. Next slide, please. Charlottesville's got the opportunity to really lead in life sciences and clean technology. Obviously, these are two sectors that are growing quite fast for the country. But in addition to that, there are really strong assets and associations in Charlottesville to support the growth of these sectors locally as well, both with two strong trade associations as well as the UVA providing a really strong foundation in health sciences and a lot of the initial research as it relates to clean technology as well. So really great, again, portfolios in terms of export-based clusters to which drive our economy and really become a foundation to the economic development strategy work. Next slide. Charlottesville has a strong asset in UVA, continuing to build out that partnership is essential for economic development. Obviously, being a college town, having a really strong relationship and a positive relationship with your anchor institution is really important. And you'll see that we have made this an important part of our strategy when we get to the strategic plan in a bit. Next slide, please. In addition, while we have a strong innovation-based economy, it's important to think through how we're thinking about inclusivity as it relates to Charlottesville. So while there's a lot of opportunity in terms of the knowledge-based sector, it's a highly skilled population, there are gaps as it relates to earnings, poverty, and educational attainment levels between white and BIPOC populations. So you'll see that we've put a considerable amount of effort and thought into how we can approach those challenges in our economic development strategy that you'll see in just a bit as well. Next slide. Charlottesville has a very strong and growing diverse entrepreneurial community. So about 7 in 10 businesses in Charlottesville are actually small businesses. They are an important part to the identity of who Charlottesville is. And there's an opportunity for us to think about how we utilize entrepreneurship to support diversity and inclusion and equity in Charlottesville as well. And so you'll see that it becomes a real pillar for us as we think about how to create community wealth in our community going forward as well. Next slide. Charlottesville can bridge equity gaps through innovative workforce development. So in addition to tackling our equity gaps through entrepreneurship, we can also do that through innovative workforce development programs. And so really having an emphasis on skill development. So BIPOC employment is concentrated currently in a lot of lower paying occupations. So some of the work that we did to address that is through some of this career pathways research that Onea mentioned earlier. So using that work to guide some of our recommendations as it relates to workforce development is going to be a key part to Charlottesville's economic development strategy. So when we think about economic development today, particularly just broadly speaking, it can't just be about business attraction or even business expansion. There has to be a workforce development piece to that, and you'll see that in your strategy as well. Next slide, please. And, while there's a lot of great assets in Charlottesville as it relates to build an economic development strategy upon, generally speaking, the economic development story is one that is largely untold. Still needing an effort to support communication assets around economic development. Economic Development 101 says that storytelling is a really important part to communicating our business climate and what our strengths are and our capabilities. And so really, you'll see that as we move to the strategy, that is a focus of our work going forward as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, there's a lot of terrific quality of place assets in Charlottesville. A lot of things from great quality of place in terms of amenities, family-owned eateries, restaurants, activities, and festivals. But one of the things that can continue to be thought about and sort of continue to be reimagined is how do we complement those with new placemaking strategies to support a lot of the efforts that are happening as it relates to destination development. So with that, those are sort of the 10 key takeaways. We'll turn now to talking a little bit about our industry sectors before we move to the strategy work. Next slide, please.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So there are 6 target clusters that form the economic portfolio for Charlottesville. One of them is bioscience and life sciences. This cluster is a strong contributor to the economy in Charlottesville, and it has a strong asset in the UVA Medical Center and the Charlottesville BioHub as well. Charlottesville has this particular specialization in research and development, as well as device manufacturing. Another important cluster in Charlottesville is information technology. This is actually the fastest growing clusters among all of those we studied. It's highly educated and offers competitive earnings. So as we think of talent attraction, we have an edge there. It also builds on Virginia's only citywide technology zone in Charlottesville, and there's a particular specialization in software and app development. Business and financial services is another important cluster in Charlottesville. It's fast growing, and it's also forecasted to grow even faster in the future. It's a cluster that has high racial diversity, and it also is dependent on local supply chains, so it's quite sustainable and resilient in that sense. There are a number of important companies in Charlottesville, and there's a particular specialization in financial services. Defense and security is a legacy cluster, of course. There's a strong competitive advantage in the region. It builds on the highly educated workforce, and it's a major exporting cluster. Of course, we're benefiting here from the strategic location of the city and the major companies that are in the city. Our particular specialization is, of course, around instrument manufacturing. Tourism is our largest cluster in terms of employment. It has high gender diversity. It has a very skilled workforce in what they do, and a high share of exports, of course, because it draws in a lot of out-of-region dollars. Of course, we're building on all of the tourism assets that we've got, whether it's the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, the wineries, breweries, as well as the arts and cultural facilities. And then finally, clean technology. This is a cluster that has a large employment base. It is a significant contributor to the economy. It's supported by the work of the Renewable Energy Alliance, and there's a specific specialization in sustainable energy. Thank you. Stephen, moving on to the next slide.
Next slide, please.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to give you an overview of how we'll approach the strategy. So next slide, please. So the parts of the strategy that we're going to share with you today is an overall vision statement that's going to guide economic development, our desired goals, and our strategies associated with those goals, or how do we activate on those goals. The part of the strategy that you won't see today is actually around the action plan or the implementation plan. We're in the process of working with that with Chris, but once we've got approval on our strategy and our direction, we'll come back and finalize the implementation plan and what the metrics and resources and action steps look like. But we're going to talk about the first three pieces of this today. Next slide, please. So a vision statement. A cultural and creative capital of Virginia, Charlottesville treasures its people and diversity, a leader in innovation and sustainability. So a nice, strong vision statement to grow, to guide our economic development work, to be kind of that future vision that we hope to achieve out of our economic development strategy. I'll read it one more time. A cultural and creative capital of Virginia, Charlottesville treasures its people and diversity, a leader in sustainability and innovation. Next slide, please. In terms of the strategy, we've built the strategy around 5 goals, and we'll provide an overview of these goals, and then we'll talk about each of them in detail. So goal 1 is around equitable entrepreneurship. We will invest in entrepreneurship to grow a more diverse, equitable, and vibrant Charlottesville. Goal 2 is intentional and innovative growth. We will build an innovative economy, one that values intentional growth, value-added partnerships, and sustainability for tomorrow. Goal 3 is pathways for opportunity. We will create pathways of opportunity, creating opportunity for all Charlottesville residents. Goal 4 is around creative placemaking. We will invest in placemaking to celebrate Charlottesville's creativity and culture. And goal 5 is around storytelling for investment. We will position Charlottesville as a community open for investment. Next slide, please. So goal 1, equitable entrepreneurship. We'll invest in entrepreneurship to grow a more diverse, equitable, and vibrant Charlottesville. Why does it matter? A vibrant and inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem is important for supporting a diverse group of entrepreneurs, particularly as it relates in both local and export sectors. And through this type of economic development support, we can provide opportunity for underserved businesses, creating an opportunity for wealth generation and creating greater shared prosperity. Next slide. So how will we achieve this? We've outlined 8 strategies to do this. First, partnering to grow Charlottesville's BIPOC and diverse businesses. And you'll see that we've expanded the definition by which we define diverse businesses to include LGBTQ businesses, women-owned business, veteran-owned business, BIPOC businesses through technical training, capital access, and networking. Strategy 1.2 is establishing a one-stop hub, website, or app for support services, culturally sensitive resources on how to navigate cities' processes. But one of the things that we heard in our discussions with a lot of entrepreneurs is the idea that there's a lot of terrific resources in Charlottesville, but needing to create a place where they're all housed in one area. It's a centrally located hub. Strategy 1.3 is supporting home-based businesses, entrepreneurship, and remote work. Strategy 1.4 is growing the Go Startup initiative, setting goals for diverse participants. Again, this is already expanding on a terrific program that's working and been quite effective in Charlottesville, but doing a bit more to expand it and have really targeted goals for participation and who's participating in those programs. Strategy 1.5 is continuing the Business Equity Fund program. Strategy 1.6 is exploring the creation of a subsidized shared commercial space on or near the downtown mall. The idea of being able to create a space where entrepreneurs can come together and sort of test the market, so to speak, for products and services is the idea around a shared space. Strategy 1.7 is continuing to support a partner ESOs for program funding. And strategy 1.8 is promoting and telling the story of Charlottesville's diverse entrepreneurs. Next slide, please. So how do we measure this? metrics that we'll look to as evaluation metrics, KPI metrics, business formation by background, understanding how firms, who are starting firms and how we manage, how those firms are being, how those firms are growing. Looking at the number of businesses, both home-based businesses and small businesses that are participating in our programs. Looking at the entrepreneurs that are receiving the capital dollars and the funding initiatives that we're providing. And then thinking through about the number of entrepreneurs and who we're promoting as part of telling our story. Next slide. So then that moves us to goal 2, which is much more of our, I would suggest, our traditional economic development outreach as we would think about business attraction or expansion goal. So intentional and innovative growth. We will build an innovative economy, one that values intentional growth and value-added partnerships and sustainability for the future. Again, this is about creating business opportunity, investing in those export-based businesses, creating those partnerships that are really important with our anchor institution in UVA and others as well to grow that opportunity, that capacity in our innovative based economy. Next slide. So how do we do that? We've outlined 7 strategies to do that. First is continuing to execute a business retention program, one that's measured and has real metrics, and using that program to understand the needs of our business and our business community. 2 is to continue the work that Chris and his team is doing with his partners at the Commonwealth and other regional partners around how do we attract in private sector investment and decision makers into the region. Goal 2.3 is focusing in partnership with our industry associations on efforts to really focus on our scalable technology-based businesses. So this is the efforts that is happening around life sciences and clean technology, for instance, and the associations that we mentioned earlier. Strategy 2.4 is ensuring that we're aligning policy and planning and future redevelopment opportunities to support those industries and the growth of those industries, particularly what are some of the commercial space needs that those will have. 2.5 is continuing to expand our CVille Match program. 2.6 is strengthening our partners, our partnerships with the county, UVA, and others to advance our initiatives. And then 2.7 is thinking about how we can use publicly owned land and public-private partnerships to support, quality job development, investment, and housing options that Charlottesville will need for the future. How will we measure that? If you'll go to the next slide. The metrics to think through there are measuring the number, counting the number of businesses that we're visiting, understanding how we're seeing new business development happening around the types of businesses, both by total and by cluster, looking at the job creation that's associated with that. Having those metrics over time, we can also do an economic impact analysis, looking at our CVille Match program, and then also understanding the number of outside site selectors that we're engaging, investors that we're engaging, and their interest in our community as well. Go to the next slide, please. So goal 3 is around creating pathways. This is, again, how do we tackle our opportunity gaps? And doing this through providing really aligned, industry-aligned workforce development opportunities. So we will create pathways of opportunity, creating opportunity for all Charlottesville residents. And doing this, we can meet the needs of our business to ensure they've got the talent pipelines necessary, but also, again, creating opportunity for residents to fully participate in the economy, the innovative economy that we're growing in Charlottesville. To do that, we've outlined a series of strategies. Go to the next slide, please. We've got 8 strategies as it relates to our pathway work. So one is just continuing to educate private sector leaders on the importance of workforce development and why they should be thinking about this in partnership with the city and the county and its partners. 2 is leading some efforts to really think about how we take the earn and learn model and map that with our Charlottesville's export and tech sectors, particularly around clean technology, software, and life sciences. Working with workforce partners on strategy 3.3 around a healthcare initiative to create opportunities for healthcare. 3.4 is continuing to scale our Go Cook program that's been really successful, but also thinking about how we can link that and resources that are needed to help grow and scale enterprises in Charlottesville as it relates to our restaurant industry. 3.5 is partnering with our schools to align industry focused programming as it relates to our growth sectors. 3.6 is expanding our Go Hire program to focus on underserved enterprises and the needs of underserved enterprises. 3.7 is advocating for leadership opportunities for BIPOC and underserved and up and coming leaders. So this question, if one of the things, if we want to really hold on to talent in Charlottesville, creating opportunities for public engagement for our young leaders, diverse leaders, to really have create stickiness in the community, so to speak. And then 3.8 is continue to support the outline of the priorities that you've outlined in your comprehensive plan and your affordable housing plan to ensure that we're creating the types of housing that's necessary to support residents that are going to be living and working in our community as well. So we'll go to the next slide to talk about how to measure that. So measuring that is looking through the number of program participants, the number of training programs that we're creating, the share of BIPOC residents, and looking also at the number of looking at our per capita income to see how that's changing over time as well. So go to goal 4. So goal 4 is really around placemaking, and that is we will invest in placemaking to celebrate Charlottesville creativity and culture. Why do we want to do that? Obviously, placemaking and destination development is important for visitor attraction, but it's also very important for resident retention and happiness and all the things that come with great quality of place, lovability, all that jazz as we talk about, and why placemaking matters. So then we'll go to the strategies for that goal, the next strategy. So we've outlined 5 strategies there. First and foremost is collaboratively reimagining with stakeholders around the historic downtown mall and a retail strategy to support that. 4.2 is working to think about how we can support and make Charlottesville an even more welcoming community through a welcoming initiative. 4.3 is working to help support the Rising Professional Program that the Chamber supports. Goal 4.4 is working with our destination marketing organization, Visit Charlottesville, to continue to support the efforts that they do to grow our destination assets and support our destination community and our destination economy. And 4.5 is continuing to maintain, provide, and promote innovative parking solutions, because I know parking is a key element of the Economic Development Department that service that Chris and team provide as well. We go to how to measure our impact around placemaking, number of visitors, the number of events that we're doing, how are we achieving our stickiness in terms of residents that target age of 24 to 34-year-old, and the new types of investments that are happening both in the entertainment and hospitality space as well. So then we'll go to the final goal, which is around storytelling for future, and that is investing in ensuring that we're positioning Charlottesville as a place that's open for investment. Again, storytelling and marketing, a essential foundational element of economic development to ensure that you're getting sort of the bang for their buck, and so to speak, of all the investments that you're making in the community when we want to be telling that story. So how do we activate on that? Go to the next slide. We've got 4 strategies there. So one is thinking through a real competitive identity for Charlottesville's economic development efforts. What is our story and how do we want to communicate it? 5.2 is after we've got that identity and that essence is really updating all of our promotional materials to represent that, as well as updating all the materials that you have online with all the great research that Arne and our team has done as it relates to support this strategy. So that's everything from updating our website to our investor pitches to our target profiles. Strategy 5.3 is then ensuring that we've got the right type of technology infrastructure to support that, particularly a really strong, robust CRM system that can support our business visitation program in our leads program. And then 5.4 is after we've created all those materials, we do all the work that we're doing this strategy, continuing to ensure that we've got a really strong, robust communication and marketing plan and effort to really support and tell the story as it relates to what's happening in economic development for residents, for you all as policymakers, but also our business stakeholders and community stakeholders as well. How do we measure success there? Is the next slide. So we'll do that through looking at website visitors, engagement around social media, all the things that earn media placements, all as it relates to our visibility in the press, as well as our online visibility. So then get to the next slide, just as a final recap. Again, sort of 5 goals to really to ground this strategy. One is that as we advance in economic development efforts in Charlottesville, we want to really be centered on promoting equitable entrepreneurship, growing a diverse entrepreneurship community as a means to represent who Charlottesville is, but also as a wealth creation opportunity for shared value. 2, really focusing on how we're intentional about growing our innovation-based economy and establishing the partnerships and efforts around that to do that. Goal 3, again, is a reminder, is about creating the pathways, the workforce development opportunities to match residents and skills with the industry that we're growing in Charlottesville, ensuring that we don't have a mismatch, but are really leveraging the opportunities to create opportunity for all residents in Charlottesville. Goal 4 is around placemaking. Again, continue to build off all the strong efforts that Charlottesville's been really known for in terms of its downtown core, but continue to elevate that and refresh that and keep that always as a focus going forward, because destination development, place element is such an important part for economic development today. And then finally, as you do all 4 of these efforts, as you build out entrepreneurship, as you grow an innovation-based economy, as you create the opportunities for workforce, and do all the things that make Charlottesville a great place, you got to tell the story. You got to invest in the marketing communications efforts to support that. So really positioning the community open for investment and investing in the marketing efforts for that. So with that, we've kind of hopefully haven't drank from too much from a fire hydrant, but that's a bit of the recap of the strategy. We look forward to taking your questions and how if you've got any questions about this.
Council, any questions?
Thank you for that. When do you think you'll have the action steps identified?
That's a great question. I'm not sure who just asked the question, but we have a draft of that actually with Chris already. Chris has already seen that. We're actually going to be walking through that action matrix on, I believe, the calls for Thursday. We've got a draft, and we'll have that a pretty strong draft of that to share by end of week, I would assume.
And then I guess, is there a process, Mr. Engel, for like tracking this over the course of the next 5 years, or how does that work in terms of, all these seem like really good and excellent goals, but how do we maintain momentum or have accountability, or whatever term you want to use, to actually execute on this?
Yeah, good question. One of the challenges we've presented to the consultants is to present us with data, metrics that are attainable, that don't cost us an arm and a leg, so to speak. So freely available data that is readily available annually, so that we can use that as a starting point for measuring progress on each of these. That'll be easier on some of these than others. So we'll have to dive into that and kind of create a path for each of the big buckets, each of the 5 major goals, to have accountability on each of those with some metrics under each of them.
Okay. Do you see this, what would count as success sort of from a macro perspective? Is it like 10% or 5% increase the GDP for this area? Is that, what sort of ways, in looking at you as well as the consultants, is it, I guess you've identified sort of more micro level metrics and ways of telling if things have gotten better, so to speak. Are there any sort of larger scale things we could measure in terms of relationships with the university or with the county, or just looking at the economic activity of this region and how it grows?
Stephen, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah. So thanks, Councilmember. Those are great questions. I think the way that I think about KPI metrics is, I kind of think about KPI metrics kind of in 2 buckets, right? One is, I think the larger, what you're asking are big picture metrics, which are those larger outcome metrics. And so as over the course of 5 years, how many jobs do we create in life sciences? How many jobs do we see that are created in software technology? How many residents that are 25 to 34-year-olds that have stuck around or sticking around? How many residents are participated in our training programs? For me, those are big outcome metrics. Or what's the share of our BIPOC population that is still in the steady, and maybe we haven't seen a decline there. So we've outlined some of those key metrics as part of the KPI plan, and we're going to work with Chris to refine that list on Thursday. So there's those metrics. But in addition to that, I think you're hitting on another really important point in terms of metrics, and those are those kind of in-process metrics, and that is the number of folks that are participating in our programs. How do we review our relationship with the university, and how are we achieving that relationship? Our relationship with the county, our relationship with our visit group. all of those also play into the importance of that as well. And so, as we're working through the implementation plan, I sort of think about our KPI metrics in the balance of having sort of, again, the right number of outcome metrics, but also the right number of metrics that you measure that kind of see that you're doing this work year by year and you're kind of tracking along to ensure that you're kind of checking off the boxes, so to speak, around the strategy. We'll have a combination of both of those types of metrics in this plan.
Is your firm sort of engaged going forward with this in terms of tracking, or are you going to kind of get us to a point and then it's kind of over to Chris?
Yep, the goal is to allow y'all to fish. So it's to set up the plan, to work with Chris and team to identify the right data, to refine the right types of the metrics, to build out a really clear implementation plan. So an implementation plan is saying, this is what we're going to do in year 1, this is what we're going to do in year 2, year 3, et cetera, and then to hand that over to Chris and to have Chris and team implement this plan. So that, Chris and team and others have been doing, they're professional economic developers. It's got a stand-up team. They'll do great work. It's now they'll have a clear roadmap on how to implement this.
Got it. And it seems like, Chris, a lot of this is going to involve like working with workforce development initiatives, I guess, in the area and strengthening connections with the university. I know they've got a new bio life sciences building being built over at Fontaine Research Park, which apparently is like a $400 million project or something. So.
Yes, if you look through all of the big goals as well as the strategies, there's an element of partnership built in, and economic development, as you've heard mentioned before, it's not a solo game. And we as a small city in a larger region have always been a participant in regional economic development with the Central Virginia Partnership, with the Chamber, with a lot of other entities. So there's elements that our group, our office of 5 will lead, and then there's things that we'll partner on and things that we'll support on going through. So there's a mix of all of those, but heavy on the partnerships for many of those engagements. The Visitors Bureau has the lead on some things that we're now going to kind of bump up against and be partners with, the workforce entities as well, the university for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that they were, to build off that point, it's one of the reasons that all of those partners that Chris just outlined have been engaged in this process. So to Chris's credit and team's credit, they built out a robust steering committee that had all representation from the university, from the workforce partners, from the other, from the county visit organization as well, to all be engaged in this process. And so they've seen this strategy as well. So this will not all come as a surprise. They're engaged, have been engaged in terms of the architecture of this work, so to speak, as well.
When was the last time we had a plan? Or when was the last plan? I know we've had a plan.
Far too long ago. We have not had a consultant in my time with the city. I've been with the city 18 years. We did an internal plan, not to say we didn't have a plan at all. We did an internal plan around 2009, 2010, and then we have updated that ourselves throughout the years. When we ran into COVID, we created a separate plan that sought to address specifics related to that. That was called Recovery Roadmap. You might remember that.
Yeah.
But this is the first time in a while. When Mr. Rogers came to the city and we met for the first few times, he asked about that and said, "It's time. Do you think it's time?" And I said, "Yes, it is. It's time." And so we've engaged consultants to help for the first time in a while. And it is helpful in many ways. You saw just 45 slides. There's 145 slides in the appendices that I'd be happy to share and will become ultimately a part of the report in terms of the research that was done. So that's a level of detail and deep dive that we've not been able to take in a number of years. So it's helpful to have that validation.
Okay. So I just have a couple of comments. One, I like what you're saying about creative placemaking and, the diverse economic base. I think the public really should see that, because I think, and we are primarily a big university town, but it is offspurs a lot of those tech type of industries that you mentioned, and I'm glad that that Chris kind of has a whirl in both of these because we're both on the Visitors Tourism Board, and when we're there, it seems like we're primarily talking about getting visitors to stay 2 or 3 nights or an extra night. And of course, when I think of economic development, I'm thinking of 2 to 3 decades or more, a lot longer, a lot more substantial than that. But I think that they definitely can merge because a lot of people come here because of they want to visit, some of the things that you had mentioned. I think that it's great. So I'm glad that, Chris is able to talk about what we're doing on that board and how it can tie into the larger city. And when we talk during the kind of focus groups and individual, that, I talked about the work that's going on in Denver. It seemed like they're doing, I can't think of the cute town in South Carolina, that Greenville.
Yeah.
Greenville. I think that y'all said y'all did the plan for
We
Greenville.
did the plan for Greenville.
Greenville
That's right.
is rocking, what they're doing down there. And I think that if we could, get some insights of some of the things that they're doing down there, here, I think would really be good. I know that they have some growing pains and things as well, but I think that they seem to begin a good formula. So that's all I have to say. I look forward to this. You're right. We really need a game plan on how we to grow. But I'm glad that the board, when we looked at the project a few months ago for like New Hill Development, how that's going to spur a lot of the smaller businesses that could potentially grow into really bigger businesses. So thank you all. Looking forward to more of the information on this.
Question, comments, Sam?
Thank you for your presentation. I looked at the slides that we had earlier, prior to today, and I'm glad to know that your action plan is going to address some of the potential metrics in Goal 1, because my concern is having small businesses, having diversity, but making sure that not only are they visible, but that they are sustainable. It's one thing for me to open a business today, and we all know that it's a 2 to 3 year time frame before businesses are going to net a profit. And what are we going to do to ensure that these businesses remain? And how are we going to show our community that we are committed to inclusion? You have your metrics and you have stated what your diversity will be, but how are the businesses going to have the necessary funding? What is the action plan going to be? What are the support mechanisms that are going to be there? And at what point do you have serious conversations with businesses about their viability before they launch? Or midstream, if the viability changes, what are we doing to help them make the necessary shifts? Because small businesses are important and they are different from corporations and box stores and things that have monies and things available that a small entrepreneur won't have. And if you're encouraging people to do this, because you're encouraging people to remain in the community, but we don't have the foundation or the support mechanism, then all of the money that you've spent with your current corporation to help you develop this has been a waste.
If I could offer just a quick comment, I think your comment about sustainability is important, and to speak to that, recently launched the Envision grant program with United Way, supported by the county as well as the city, is an effort to grab those businesses that are in place. Maybe they're in their second year. The grant is set up to help folks that have been around at least 2 years get to that third, fourth, and fifth year, which are critical. We recognize that as a gap. There's a lot of resources around starting. We have some of those internally. The Small Business Development Center and other colleagues in town have other resources, but there was a little bit of a gap or a cliff that happened after a year or two. And so that's one mechanism where it's a partnership, to the other point about we're not going to be able to do everything. So just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
One question, you made reference to developing a more inclusive economy. Did you have any higher level metrics to measure kind of what success on that goal will look like that you've discussed or thought about?
Not in detail. I don't know if Stephen wants to talk to any at the moment, but we are meeting to kind of flesh out that next and final phase of the engagement that will have more detailed metrics about growth. The challenge is in a small community, as you further segment the business owner types, you get to a point where there's less and less data that's valid. So that becomes a challenge. We're trying to avoid having to purchase data or do extensive surveys. That's another way to get at it. So that's a challenge that we're addressing with the team as we move through this.
Well, yeah, a couple comments. I think there's a lot of good stuff in here, but I continue to think we need to be more explicit as one of the top goals, having a strategy for community wealth building, which I don't just say to say. I think this is something a lot of localities are looking at. Richmond's created an Office of Community Wealth Building. Burlington and Oakland have made significant progress here. And thinking about how that connects to some of the things you mentioned, like workforce development, GO programs, but how could that connect as part of an even bigger picture strategy around community development corporations, community development financial institutions that are opening up wealth building to everyone in the community, which I say because we're all aware of them, but we see the statistics on the level of wealth, income gaps, lack of economic mobility. I think we just have to tie that into our economic development plan more explicitly and have some of the metrics we look at for success, the income and wealth gaps in our community by race, or the Orange Dots report measure of economic mobility in our city, and being able to see 5 years from now, is it getting worse, better, changing? Mm-hmm. And I think a strategy for community wealth building, I think would just be extremely important for us to try to hit that. So again, to me, that's the biggest thing, is having that more explicit as a top goal. 2, having some of the metrics being wealth and income gaps, the measure of economic mobility in our community are the biggest points for me. And a third, much smaller one, and maybe it'll get to the action items, is if HUD Section 3 will be incorporated into economic development in any way, which I know is just one smaller thing where I think there could be some opportunities for wealth building. But again, I think there's a lot of good things in it. I just wonder if there's a way to elevate those things in a more systematic way. But appreciate all the work.
Thank you.
And I would just say, first, to echo thanks for the work that is not quite yet done, but moving right along. I am conscious of the fact that our economic development activities, I shouldn't say it, that the development of the economy in our area is distinguished from your activities. But the way that our economy is developing, there are a number of different critical variables at different points in the development of a company. For the very beginning, first year, second year, maybe access to capital. Third year, if you're looking at continued expansion, it may be having to get a whole new management team. There are also issues of space. How do you go from being a 3,000 square foot office or store to being a 10,000 square foot place where we may not have many 10,000 square feet facilities available? I'm wondering on the latter point whether either Chris, you or our consultants have paid much attention to where physically we will be able to allow for expansion within the city limits.
Yeah, we think about it all the time. Space is one of the key questions we get from new and growing companies here. 10 square miles is not much, and 70% of it is in residential, and that's unlikely to change, only to get more dense, most likely. So we're very limited, which is why we participate regionally, and a company that lands in Greene or Louisa or Albemarle County can provide and does provide jobs for us. Our next speaker is going to speak about the defense industry, which is located in the county, not mostly in the city anymore. But there's obviously a benefit from that. So, we're not able to grow more land, so there's not really a solution there. but we do need to use it as best we can. And part of the process with the comp plan and the rezoning is looking at what limited kind of industrial, light industrial, we don't really have heavy industrial anymore, but light industrial, preserving that to the extent that we can, preserving business opportunity, mixed use opportunity. By and large, most of our businesses are located in mixed use areas now, and that works for most of them, but doesn't work for all of them. So the ones that it doesn't work for by virtue of the zoning and or market forces, they end up moving out of the city. And that's an unfortunate circumstance. I don't have a way to solve that. I don't know that Stephen would offer one either, but that's our situation as we're in right now. But we do hear that often, and we're challenged with that regularly.
I think Chris is exactly right. So that is the thing that you have to think regionally as it relates to this, that this question about space and the space that we have, obviously in the city, you've got 10 square miles. So as we think about the growth of some of these export sectors, thinking about how we think regionally, particularly the relationship with our county and the potential spillover effects and opportunities that creates for our current residents is one way to do that. I will say, as part of this work, we did do a real estate assessment as well, ensuring that we were looking at the space and the space needs for these for the growth sectors that are recommended, and that work's included will be included in the strategy as well. So we have done some initial thinking of that, but Chris is right, ensuring that when you've got the comp plan and available space comes up, that we're being really smart and strategic about how we leverage that and make the right types of decisions that are going to support all the goals that we've outlined here in the strategy going forward.
Okay, well, shall we now turn to your next introduction?
Yes. Thank you, Stephen. I'm Nate. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. So our next speaker is Letty Bien. She's the Defense Affairs Coordinator for the Charlottesville Regional Chamber of Commerce. She's a retired colonel from the Army. And she has been working in this space on behalf of the Chamber for a number of years. And one of the initiatives that has long been desired was a locally done economic impact analysis of the industry, the defense sector writ large. So that has been done. It is voluminous, and we won't bore you with the 100 pages, but Letty's going to try and condense it for you in a manner that is digestible and answer any questions that you may have. She has a presentation that just appeared. Thank you, David. And I think she's going to guide her own slides with the clicker. So, Letty?
So we hope.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for having me very much. A little note of personal privilege. I wanted to thank Mr. Sanders for attending Our Community Salutes event we had last Saturday, where we recognized all of our high school students graduating and going into the various services. I hope you enjoyed yourself, sir. I'm here today to it's kind of an extension of what we just heard. I'm addressing one of those legacy sectors, and that's the defense community. And so, okay, let's see here. Let's see. Which one am I pressing? That one? Everyone's clickers are different.
There you go.
Is that the middle?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just takes a second.
Thank you. So what was the motivation behind us doing this? It was the state has been doing economic impact studies on this sector. Obviously, defense in Virginia is significant, particularly in Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads area, Norfolk, and all of that. And they put us into a region that goes all the way up to Manassas and down past Lynchburg when they were doing their economic impact studies on the defense community. I saw our numbers. I knew they were significantly low. Things were not included that I've come to know are part of the defense community here. And so we decided, as Chris mentioned, that we needed to do an impact study specifically for our area. And so we knew we could ferret out a bunch of hidden, if you will, hidden aspects of the defense industry, including startups, patents, private sector, and whatnot. And then at the end of the day, because we think it's so important, was engaging the community on this sector and how it impacts everything we do. The study included the city of Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and Greene. And as we've been talking, you've been hearing a lot about partnerships and regional size and all that. And so we included those three because those are the three that have been very involved with the Chamber's Defense Affairs Committee, and that's where the bulk of all of this information would come from. So we talk about partnerships, and there we go. So thank you to the City of Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and UVA Foundation, along with the city, ponied up the funds for that economic impact study. It was done by the Weldon Cooper Center, and we received it about a month or so ago, but we've been hesitant until we had everybody that was engaged briefed before we sort of have now put it out there. And so just want to thank everybody. Thank you very much, everyone. You have a slow clicker.
It's almost like you got to point it.
There it is.
Oh, now it's gonna go backwards, I bet. So, what does the study cover? It's I don't think it's 100 and something pages, but it's about 60 pages. So, but less than the one you just heard from. So the study gives a full description of the defense community as they identified it, the history, the size, the growth, and some of the features associated. It zeroed in on 2021, and I might remind you, 2021 was still a COVID year. It also talked about the community benefits in terms of quality of life and safety and volunteerism and innovation, because you have folks within that community that do a lot of volunteerism, if you will. They're active in their churches. With SBCA, they coach Little League and do all of that stuff. So that is touched also in the study. Come on, come on. So what was considered the defense industry for purposes of the study we did? And I'm hoping that residents will get a copy of this so they can look at it as well. But of course, Ravenna Station, which as you know is in the county. We looked at DoD contracts in the region, and that was important because we found that there were quite a few here within the city limits that are doing defense work, not necessarily with Ravenna Station. We looked at the Judge Advocate General Legal Center and School, which as you know is on the grounds of UVA. And then within the University of Virginia, we looked at their contracts and grants, their active duty military, their startups. We looked at veterans. We looked at Reserve and National Guard that are located here in the community. And then we looked at other things that, we dug down as deep as we possibly could. So that was where we were with identifying the study. So on employment impacts, the largest percentage of employment impact, it comes out of what happens at Ravenna Station. And let's face it, the defense industry here has been quiet, so quiet. I mean, even the janitor at Ravenna Station will not tell you what he does. I can tell you from personal experience, it's harder to get into Ravenna Station than it is CIA headquarters. So, our secret squirrels over there, everyone is so quiet about what they do that the vision from everybody in the community is that it's not that big, that it's not that important. Everyone goes, oh, that place up off 29, and then, okay, the JAG school, and, that's about it. But we have found, in fact, it is quite large. How do I get back? This one? Oh, there we go. This one's important for the city, and for a number of reasons. The 18 local companies here with 71 grants from 2012 to 2021, the majority of them are located in the city limits. And that, I think, is important, and that's doing research and development under the DoD umbrella, Department of Defense umbrella. So the SBIR, the STTR, the SBIR, they're highly competitive programs. They encourage small domestic companies, usually with a requirement that they be veteran-owned, minority-owned, women-owned, to do research and development with a potential for what they come up with to be commercialized. You have a company right here in Charlottesville that incredibly did not even show up in the study, and we'll get to that in a moment. Luna Labs, they're right around the corner, you know of Luna Labs, and they have 65 employees. They used to be, and I think the reason they didn't show up is because they were originally, and this is very interesting, and why I think we're still under our numbers. Luna Labs headquartered was in Roanoke with 6 employees. All the work was done here in the city of Charlottesville with 65 employees. So if you went into the Federal Register and you didn't look up by zip code where the work was being done, all you're seeing is all their contracts, all their grant money accounts for Roanoke. And so that, in fact, is not the case. Well, they became independent. Now that's just Luna Labs, and it's just a Charlottesville company. So this was pretty important with regard to what you have here. And so with all of this taking it into account, what does our number look like? And you saw earlier that my big reveal is this number. So as my husband likes to say, 1,200 million, because people can sort of absorb million over billion. And actually it was 1.2 and change, like 1.218. That is the economic impact of the defense sector in our region in 2021. 1 year. And I think that is pretty darn significant. So what did it account for? We just heard from the prior consultant that he mentioned 13,000 jobs in the 3 different sectors. Well, of those 13,000, we've identified more than half are in this sector. 7,300 are in this sector for a total of the $1.2 billion output. And so what we always thought was tourism and hospitality as being the second largest industry after the whole University of Virginia, in fact, this is hundreds of millions of dollars more than that. And so it becomes the second highest economic engine in our region. And let's face it, people who work in the city, in JAG school, they live in Forest Lakes. And people who work at Ravenna live in Charlottesville. These folks do not look at the city limits and the county limits. They live where they want to live, and they work then within this industry. So we have a total regional economic impact, and clearly Albemarle is the highest, but Charlottesville is nothing to shrug your shoulders at in this $1.2 billion output.
Letty, could I ask you, I'm not sure I understand on this slide, $831 in value added.
I knew someone was going to ask me that.
I'm glad not to have disappointed you.
Well, I usually start this out by saying, if you're going to ask me about any of the numbers, I'm the wrong person to ask. I'm just the cute face up here, you know. Weldon Cooper Center does all that. So value added equals the difference between an industry's gross output, and that's like sales or receipts, other operating income, commodity taxes, inventory change, and the cost of its intermediate inputs, energy, raw materials, blah, 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 and semi-finished goods and services that are purchased from all sources.
Not including labor?
Not including labor.
Okay.
But, and I've asked Weldon Cooper Center, if I add the 618 in labor and I add the 831 in value,
You get 1.4, not
you get
1.2.
1.4. How does that happen? And I was a deer in headlights as he explained to me the numbers. But I'm happy to get back and give Chris a better explanation than I've given you just now.
Oh, but first of all, it's 831 million, not just $831.
Yes.
Okay, and so I get the concept of value added. I was having a hard time figuring out how $831 would figure into that.
Oh, yes. I'm glad you pointed that out. That's an error in my slide. And I still am presenting this to some other folks. So thank you very much, Mr. Snook. And so at the very beginning, I had said, we showed you this, the motivation, and then the question is now, what do we do with all this information? I mean, I can assure you that workforce is an issue on both scales. So for example, Northrop Grumman will hire people right out of high school to become assembly people with the ability to move up. But he has a hard time getting them to do that, to apply. And so we've got to get that word out. On the other side, at the high end, where you're talking about the folks who are working intelligence and engineering and all that, you have the high end, and I think there's everything in between that's here. And workforce has been a discussion here, and it's the same thing even within the defense industry, but it's interesting because the defense industry doesn't even know who each other are. And if someone comes out of UVA and goes to work for, say, Northrop Grumman, and after a year or two or three decides that they want to, they think they have to go to Northern Virginia to find the next level of job instead of staying here. And you're talking about people who are making significant money that's important to our small businesses and everything else that we have here. And so there is a communication issue even at the base level. So, if the goal is to maintain, to grow, and expand the sector, which just based on what we just heard is clearly something that's important, we need to start to pay attention and include things that this sector needs in order to maintain it. Because as I always ask, what would the economic picture look like if we lost it? I can say to you with certainty that a city in the Midwest has offered 100 free acres to Ravenna Station to move. And everyone feels that, if Ravenna Station right now is going through about what will be, in the end, about a $90 million expansion.
Wow.
About $73 million, and then they have to get the computers and all of that. They're putting in a 250 car parking garage, and they are then they are expanding the Nicholson building for 27 new labs. So that's significant. That's going to be $90 million at the back end. So everyone says, well, they'll never move. They just put all this money into this. I've been involved in BRACs before, and I can tell you that has nothing to do with this. If a decision gets made and it's a political decision or a Department of Defense decision, then they will move regardless of how much money they just put into a building. So it's important that we support it, that we identify what its needs and opportunities are, and then move forward. Then I put, what steps should Charlottesville City Council take, if any? And it seemed based on the last briefing that Chris is all over that. They're looking right now at, obviously, the full package of an economic development program, and I would submit to you that this sector is pretty darn important to not only our survival, but also the growth of our community and some terrific pathway positions for our youth and for those coming out of UVA to keep them here in our city and area. So with that, I will just say, any questions, except about value added?
Yeah, I know we're about out of time, but thank you for this. It's very helpful. I used to live up in Greene and drive by NJIC all the time. We don't have to get into this now, but I would be interested in maybe some follow-up about what are things we can do to express our, that this is an important, I think this information is really helpful to have, to be able to tell people how important this is to our community, but I don't know, there are things we need to be doing with our, with the base generals or whoever is in charge, or with our Congress folk. I don't know, but
The state, and it's a good question, because I will tell you at the end of this month, the state has hired consultants to do a SWOT analysis on all of the military installations in the Commonwealth. And we have forced the issue that one of those will be to come here to Ravenna Station. And on the 31st of May, and Chris, we hope will be there. I don't know that I've said anything to you yet. We are having, out at North Fork, there will be a session where they are trying, it'll be a non-attributional session. We'll have military there, we'll have private sector there, we'll have the economic development people in that meeting. They want to pull together what will be a SWOT analysis to go to the governor and the Secretary of Veterans and Defense Affairs on what those next steps are. How can the state help move this? They want to become, and this has gone across the last 3 or 4 governors, so I can tell you it's not a political thing. They want Virginia to be the best state for not only the industry and the defense community, but also for people who retire to stay or get out of the military to stay here in Virginia. And so they're looking at all of these places and what can be done. And so that really would be our next step, as well as what we'll do locally to review this and see where we want to go with it. Thank you for that question. Anybody else? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Coming.
much.
Okay, so that concludes our 4 o'clock agenda. Do we have a motion to go into closed session now?
Yes, sir. Pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code, I hereby move that City Council close this open meeting and convene in a closed session as authorized by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1 for 1, discussion and consideration of appointments to the Charlottesville Albemarle Convention and Visitors Bureau, and 2, discussion and consideration of appointment of a city attorney for the city of Charlottesville.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. We don't have to actually do all that. This doesn't have to be a roll call vote. The motion passes. We're now in closed session. We'll return to a separate Zoom link for the open meeting. That will be at roughly 6:30. So anybody watching now, come back and see us at 6:30. We're in closed session.